Being in Malifaux has a way of depressing people, but this sullen atmosphere is no match for Taelor, whose boisterous and bawdy nature has never gone away. When she's not drinking at a bar, she likes to venture into the seedier areas of Malifaux, and has acquired the nickname Lady Hammerstrike by getting involved in many scraps and ending them quickly with her relic hammer. She's got a foul mouth to boot, and the hammer that she wields seems to be particularly effective when wielded against constructs. This feature has attracted the attention of the Victorias, who find that Taelor may be useful in their line of work. What's up everybody, Jeff here, and we're back for some more Malifaux lore. This time around we're going to be talking about Taelor from the Outcast, and you might notice that this is actually the first non-master that I'm covering in this series. This has kind of been a long time coming, and interesting note, this character was actually chosen by the Patreon members by a vote. Now, Taelor was actually their second choice, but there's a reason why I'm not doing their first choice yet, but that character will be coming up very soon, so stay tuned. And if you want to get involved in the voting, then definitely go over to the Patreon and check that out. So as always, I'm going to take you through all of Taelor's lore and all of her appearances in the stories and give you some quick summaries so that you can get a full sense of her character. In Taelor's case, there's not a ton, but there's one particular story that's actually very important, and that's why I wanted to cover her in this video. Feel free to get down in the comments below and suggest some other characters that you'd like to see me cover in this series, but keep in mind that I'm not going to be covering any characters who make all of their appearances alongside a more prominent character, because there's really no reason for that. If all of a character's lore is basically covered in a master's video, then there's no reason to have a second video for that character, so we're going to skip those characters for now. But on that note, let's get right back into Taelor. Taelor is at a bar on the outskirts of downtown Malifaux, surrounded by workers and laborers. One of the patrons naively tries to hit on her, but is warned off by the owner, who tells him that Taelor is a mercenary and probably lost her arm in a fight with bandits. Several other patrons chime in with conflicting stories that they were told by Taelor of how she lost the arm. Taelor prepares to tell a story, and they all gather around eagerly. Someone suggests that they should all take a shot every time she tells a lie, and the bartender starts pouring them all drinks, as she explains that she's in a truthful mood today, so all the stories she tells will be true. She adds that she lost her arm in a bet, and everyone takes a drink. Taelor had signed up with the Union, and was sent off to work in a mine in the far north called the Demon's Mouth. She was given a bandana to cover her mouth and protect from inhaling soulstone dust, and as she and the supervisor descended into the mine, she feels a sense of anxiousness take over her. The supervisor called it the Demon's Mouth Shakes. He led her deep into the tunnels, as he explains all the details of mining work. She was unable to keep track of where they were going, and after she noticed that they hadn't seen any other people for a long time, she asked him how far they needed to go. At that moment, an earthquake hit, rattling the tunnel, and it cracked some of the bracers that hold the tunnel open and caused a collapse. When Taelor collected herself, she saw her handler's body twisted and mangled beneath the rock. The path backward had been blocked by the collapse, so she decided to trudge on. She soon saw a light in a tunnel, but it wasn't artificial light, nor was it sunlight, just a strange glow. The tunnel opened into a cavern, covered in strange decorations, animal bones, and artifacts. In the middle of the room was a naked woman with pale white skin and black hair. She had 2 black horns and shining soulstones for eyes. The creature just looked at Taelor with a grin on her face for a long moment, and then invited her to play a game. Taelor tried to leave, but the creature snapped its fingers, and metal bars shot out of the ground to block Taelor's escape. It told her that she will win her way out, or she will lose and lose her way. Taelor asked if she will be let go if she wins, and the creature said yes, if that is her price. Taelor sat at the table, covered in bones, as the creature produced a deck of cards. Taelor asked for its name, and it responded that they were nameless, as they serve nameless. Taelor asked why it refers to itself as we, and the creature explained that it's a silly question. There are 2 of them, and it pointed to the soulstone in one eye, and then the other. Taelor asked about the game, and the creature tells her that they will play Bones of the Bayou. It touched her on the forehead, and her head exploded in pain, but also ideas. She realized that she suddenly knew how to play the game. It was just like Bayou 2 card, but there was an added step where they could rearrange the bones on the table to change the value of certain cards and certain hands. When the first hand was dealt, Taelor was confident, so she raised the bet by 2 scrip. The creature told her that she bets with nothing, but has to wager something of value. Taelor explained that that was the only thing she had of value, and the creature asked her if she values her life, her arms, her legs, her mind, her soul. Taelor started to protest, but the creature told her that she can gamble what she cares for, or it can take them piece by piece. It preferred to give her a fair chance, as nameless is fair. Taelor gave in and offered her pinky, and the creature raised the bet by offering to lower the gate. Taelor offered her a second finger, but the creature insisted on taking her whole hand. Taelor didn't see that she had any choice, so she agreed. The creature flipped another card, and Taelor called, but the creature raises again. It offered to raise the gate and tell Taelor the way out, and when Taelor asked her what would be of equal value, the creature told her that it wanted her arm up to the elbow. Taelor agreed. After flipping the last card, the creature rose the bet again and told Taelor that it wanted her arm up to the shoulder, and in exchange, she would raise the gate, tell Taelor the way out, and let her keep her eyes. Taelor was about to object, but thought better of it, and they both revealed their hands to show that the creature had a full house. It quickly pounced on Taelor, and grabbed her arm with its claws and pulled. After a moment, Taelor was sitting back at the table with a new hand of cards, trying to stay conscious as she lost more blood. She knew she had to end this fast, so she took a silver pocket watch out and offered it up. The creature recognized that it was very valuable to her, and looked around the room for something to match the bet. It settled on a hammer, and placed the large object next to the table, and referred to it as the Good Lady. Taelor objected that it wasn't of equal value, but the creature insisted, telling her that it was one of 13. 13 hammers for 13 tyrants. It was used to hammer the nails into the red cage, and she adds that the hammer sings Taelor's name. Taelor didn't have time to protest, so she just offered to go all in. She put up her watch, her life, her clothes, everything. The creature was pleased and offered in return the hammer, the way out, to let Taelor keep her eyes, and also to stop the bleeding from her missing arm. They played their hands, and Taelor saw that her pair of 5s had lost to the creature's pair of 8s. The creature got ready to claim its prize, but suddenly a bone appeared out of nowhere and fell on the table. It increased the value of 5s, giving her a winning hand. The creature was confused and picked up the bone to consider it, and after a long moment, it conceded defeat, adding that the servants of one of the other 13 favored Taelor. It touched her forehead again, and she was granted knowledge of the way out of the mine. If you're enjoying this video and you want to support the channel, then there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. The first would be to pick up some merchandise through my merch store. You can grab a t-shirt, a hoodie, a mug, a sticker, all sorts of cool stuff like that. You can also shop using my affiliate links, so if you're going to make any purchases from any of these companies, you can use the links in the description below to make your purchases, and it will go directly to supporting the channel at no extra cost to you. There's also a link for my Ko-fi if you would just like to give me a tip, or my Patreon if you want to support me longer term. I have a bunch of different tiers there, and there are all sorts of benefits available to people, such as early access to videos, ad-free videos, the opportunity to vote in polls about upcoming content, and extra entries into the giveaways that I run occasionally. But if none of that is your cup of tea, no problem at all. Just make sure that you're subscribed to the channel and leave a like on the video. It actually helps a tremendous amount. And if you want to go the extra mile, then consider sharing the video out with some friends who you think might find it interesting. The YouTube algorithm is not kind to small YouTubers, so that helps a whole bunch. Other than that, consider joining the Discord, also linked in the description, where you can come and hang out with me and the rest of the community and talk games. But with that, let's get right back to the video. One of the men at the bar keeps knocking back shots in an attempt to keep up with the perceived lies. Another of them puts his arm around Taelor, telling her that he believes her, and she grabs his hand and twists it backwards with her metal arm. She claims that it's doing it on its own, but the man cries out in pain and claims that he knows that's not how it works. Another man asks how she got the metal arm, and she explains that she told the union that she had lost the arm in an earthquake and they gave her a metal replacement. She was required to work for them for another 10 years to pay it off, but she quit the next day. It turned out that it was hard to stop someone with a soulstone-powered arm from doing what they wanted. Another of the patrons asks about the bone that appeared, and Taelor explains that that's a whole nother story, and if she had looked closely at it, she may have noticed some fried chicken stuck to the bone. Taelor had met Tara through the Victorias, and eventually Tara had hired her for a job. That was how she met Karina. They had boarded a train, which had some guild cargo that they were going to boost. They met in a small room to discuss their plan, and Taelor recognized Karina as a resurrectionist. She was not very fond of resurrectionists, and made a comment about Karina being part of the job. She adds that she would have expected Tara to be suspicious of resurrectionists herself, considering her condition. Tara told her that Karina was the one who had raised her after a guild agent had shot her, and besides, they had been through a lot together. In response to this, Karina leaned in and added, "tea parties." Taelor turned back to Tara confused, and Tara explained that Karina is a little broken. She was the only other person who had been through what Tara had been through, experiencing the void and making it back to tell the tale. Taelor replied that resurrectionists still aren't her people, and Tara told her that she'd have to get over that. When Taelor asked what would happen if she didn't, Tara explained that depending on her mood, Karina would either summon thousands of the screaming damned from the great nowhere to tear her to shreds, or would tie bows in her hair. Taelor decided to drop the issue and asked about the job. They made a plan to have Taelor go to the back of the train to get the cargo, which was protected by runes that would keep Tara and Karina out. Taylor's hammer, on the other hand, was suited for breaking in. Meanwhile, Tara and Karina would stop the train, and they would all meet in the woods. Before they left, Taelor asked if they would be saving any lives, and explained that the Good Lady is just a normal hammer, unless they're working to save a life. Then it wakes up. Tara said that the item that they were taking is dangerous, and in the guild's hands it may lead to a great many deaths. It's called Blight. Tara asked if all the relic hammers work that way, and Taelor explained that they each have their own rules. before Tara cut her off, as they were entering the woods and needed to get moving. As they advanced, Karina spied a buffet car for the rich passengers and helped herself to some of the chicken. Taelor protested, and the sole occupant of the car, a guild officer, heard Karina reply that they need not rob the guild on an empty stomach. The officer reached for his peacebringer and quickly took a metallic punch to the jaw and fell to the floor. Karina thanked her while finishing off a bite of chicken, and suddenly there was a screeching sound, and a tear in reality appeared behind the woman. She tossed the chicken bone over her shoulder and into the rift, and then snapped her fingers, and it closed. As they parted ways to go about their job, Karina looked back at Taelor and said, "You're welcome." Taelor headed to the back car and knocked out 2 guild guards before finding the door. It was solid metal, with no apparent way to be opened, and Taelor lifted her hammer and struck it, and the weapon melted through the door like butter. Inside were crates and supplies, as well as an old pitted blade laying on the floor. It seemed to be rotting the floor around it, and when Taelor picked it up with her metal arm, she felt a cold pain through her bones. As the train came to a stop, she hammered a hole in the side of the car and fled into the woods. Soon Tara and Karina found her, and Tara was pleased to see the blade. She took it and told Taelor that they had to leave quickly as there was a whole unit of guild on the train, and they seemed to have taken being robbed quite personally. She paid Taelor for her work, and then flexed her arm and it turned into an obsidian claw. She used it to rip a hole in reality, and told Karina and Taelor to jump in as they heard the sound of guards approaching. Taelor refused, not trusting the void, and Tara asked Karina to give her some cover so that Taelor could escape. Karina complained that she had already saved Taelor once that day, but gave in and summoned forth a horde of undead. The 2 women disappeared, as Taelor had tried to tell her not to summon the zombies, as she doesn't like the undead, and also doesn't think that all guild guards deserve to suffer for their organization's evil. As the zombies clashed with the guild, Taelor rushed forward and attacked the shambling creatures. When all the undead were down, the guild lowered their weapons to thank her, but then one of them, the man from the buffet car, recognized Taelor and raised the alarm. They all trained their weapons on her again, and Taelor noticed that the good lady was not awake, meaning that none of the guards intended to kill her, at least not yet. She dropped her hammer and surrendered. One of the men at the bar asked her why the guild didn't hang her. She says that it was all about who you know. She was friends with a guild captain, and it seems that she mysteriously escaped during the night. A bargoer is surprised to hear that she was friends with a guild officer, and she says that it's much worse. She used to work for the man. Taelor worked for Captain Gideon when she first came across to Malifaux. She considered him a good man, and he even came with her to pick up her brother from the train station when he came across to Malifaux. He had been studying at Oxford and wanted to come to Malifaux to continue his work, but his big sister had insisted on coming across first to make sure they could make a life for themselves. When he got off the train and they saw each other, Taelor playfully put him into a headlock, and after struggling free, he told her that he can embarrass her as well. Gideon was intrigued, and her brother told him that Taelor is afraid of water. Taelor then recounted a story where she almost drowned as a child, and explained that she is always careful now when going swimming. They headed back to her small apartment, and her brother Thomas checked his silver pocket watch and said that he had to go meet with Professor Lesterborn, who he would be studying soulstones under. Taelor escorted him to the professor's mansion, and the 2 academics got right to work discussing the relationship between soulstones and death. Taelor and Thomas didn't see each other much for the next few days, as both of them were busy with work. Taelor was out on a patrol with Gideon, and they chatted about a series of strange murders that had been happening, the word Kythera being found written at some of the crime scenes. They turned a corner, and were surprised to see an undead woman, who quickly tried to attack them. Once they were sure she was undead, Gideon shot the woman, and Taelor realized that she recognized her. She was Dr. Lesterborn's maid. Gideon and Taelor rushed to the doctor's mansion, but they were too late. The doors were hanging open, and they rushed inside to hear someone yelling, "Till Grand Kythera Dow." They ran upstairs to find Lesterborn waving around a book, his clothes covered in blood. He exclaimed that there was much more to the transition to death than he had thought, and Kythera was the key. The secret was in the book. Gideon quickly shot the man, and they searched the house for Thomas. They found him in the basement, chained up, his throat cut, but he still snapped his jaw at them as they got closer. Taelor was overcome by a feeling like she was drowning again, but she soon snapped out of it, and Gideon told her that he would do what needed to be done. But Taelor insisted on doing it herself, and then took her father's pocket watch off of Thomas's body before shooting him in the head. The bar was unusually quiet. Taelor takes a shot, and then she adds that she burned that hellhole down the next day, and she didn't last very long in the guild guard after that. The patrons start to leave, as last call had already passed, and they knew not to mess with Taelor when she was in a mood. Soon everyone but the owner was gone, and he laughs and tells her that he knows that she had been spinning a tale. He knew because when she tells the truth, there's more detail. He says that the only true story she's told was about coming over to Malifaux with a circus and losing her arm to a Slate Ridge mauler she was trying to tame. Taelor tells the man that the best lie is the truth nobody believes, and he gives her a cut of the profits from the drinks that were pouring during her storytelling. She thanks him and leaves, and finds herself walking down an empty road at night alone. She momentarily stops and takes out a broken silver pocket watch to consider it for a moment, and then continues on. When the Governor General bans mercenary work across Malifaux City, Von Schill calls a meeting of all of the mercenaries and bounty hunters to discuss what they'll do next. He proposes a plan to move everyone down to a town in the Badlands called Freehold, where they could continue to operate, and the guild likely wouldn't be bothered to come stop them. Parker and Taelor meet with each other at this summit, and Parker asks her when she will finally join his gang. Taelor says that she's already done her bandit thing, and besides, she's probably had more scores than he ever has. Parker is surprised, and Taelor explains that it's not worth being a bandit anyway, since the people who fence the stolen goods take most of the money. Parker tells her that when he has a problem with a fence, he shows them that he'll take something that they value far more than the money. Taelor pretends to be surprised, and then Doc Mitchell walks up, and Taelor jumps up and jabs a finger into his chest, telling him that this is a stick-up, and demanding any drinks of alcohol that he might have. Mitchell looks at Parker dejectedly, and then produces a bottle of tequila and gives it to her. She takes a long swig, and Mitchell waits, but then soon realizes that he isn't getting his bottle back, and he slinks away. Parker lowers his voice and begins to tell Taelor about his plan. He says that they need to do something big to send a message to the guild. He asks her what the one thing is that they would never expect to be stolen. Taelor replies that she isn't getting into another plot to steal Lucius's mask, as she still hasn't been able to sell the previous one. Parker stops short, but then decides to go on and tells her that they need to steal the hanging tree. Taylor's shocked and barely knows what to say, and Parker explains that they could pull it off by using an airship. Taelor considers how stupid this idea is, and how likely she would be to end up in prison. She then asks how much the job pays. And that is it for Taelor's story. It's funny, when I first started thinking about characters that I wanted to cover in this series that were not masters, Taelor was one of the first ones that came to mind, mostly because of that Welcome to Malifaux story. It's got a lot of really interesting stuff in it, and it really gives us a lot of deeper lore about some important things like Nameless, who we had never seen really anything on up until that point, and it also gives us a lot more details about things like how the relic hammers work and all sorts of cool stuff. It's also just a really well-written story. I think it's really cool how it's kind of told in reverse chronological order, and it gives us a lot of insight into Taelor and kind of her descent into alcoholism and self-destructive tendencies that we see in her kind of later lore, even though we don't get a whole lot of it. And that story is kind of the only place where we get a ton of information about Taelor herself. We can kind of see how her alcoholism that kind of pre-existed this situation that happened with her brother, it's obviously gotten worse. You can see the sort of transition from her original sculpt through 2nd edition and now her 3rd edition sculpt, where she's clearly leaning much more into her alcoholism. It's a really tragic story. Unfortunately, most character stories in Malifaux are quite tragic, and I think Taelor's kind of interesting because she's not a main character, she's not a master, but she still has a bit of a story arc, even though there's not a ton of lore for her. I would really like to see more of it in the future. But it's also interesting to see how the different characters in the lore deal with some of the traumatic experiences they've had in their lives. Taelor sort of acquired this reputation throughout the city of Malifaux for being very kind of boisterous and a little bit violent, and obviously an alcoholic. And it seems to me that if you sort of read between the lines, those are sort of some of the things that she's doing to cope with or to sort of mask some of the demons and some of the kind of horrible things that she had to deal with in her life. You can kind of contrast that with some of the other characters. I'm thinking of Hoffman in particular. Hoffman seems like the type of person who is just more sullen and like wears his horrible experiences more on his sleeve. Like, I feel like if you met him, you would immediately know that he's had a pretty tough life just based on his kind of demeanor. Whereas Taelor, I think she's trying a little harder to hide those things, but probably not doing a great job of it. I don't have much more to say about her because, as you can tell, there's not very much lore for her, really. But I do hope that in the future we will get a little bit more that deals directly with her, both to kind of develop her character a little bit more and kind of see where things go for her, but also because she does have some connections to some of the more important things in the like larger story of Malifaux. Having a relic hammer is obviously a pretty big deal, and also having met one of Nameless's servants is also pretty significant. I suspect that at some point in the fairly near future, we're going to have to learn a little bit more about Nameless, because she's kind of one of 2, so maybe 3 tyrants that we haven't really seen kind of come to the forefront or do anything significant in the ongoing story. I think it's very likely that they'll save Nameless for last because she's sort of the tyrant that took down the other tyrants to an extent, so I think it'd be interesting to see her come after we've sort of met Meridian and maybe seen a little bit more about the dragon. But I'm wondering if Taylor's going to be involved in any of those kinds of stories, because she's already got these sort of connections to Nameless as well as the relic hammers, which is obviously a huge deal. There's not very many characters that have relic hammers. Interestingly, Taylor's the only one that really has much of a story of all of them, because if you think of somebody like the Captain or even Johan, they're kind of barely characters in the lore, but they just have relic hammers for some inexplicable reason. I don't know, I'd really like to see Weird do a little bit more with that and sort of maybe do something similar to Welcome to Malifaux, where we kind of get an explanation of how they came across those relic hammers and learned a little bit more about what the relic hammers relationships were like with the people. It seems like Taelor's hammer sort of chose her. It was singing her name, quote unquote, so it seems like there might be something similar to the way that Living Blades work, where they sort of pick their wielders, at least to an extent. But we also know that they all have different ways that they get activated. In the lore, the relic hammers are, as we kind of mentioned, they're just regular hammers until they're turned on or woken up. And then they have this ability to sort of deconstruct material at an atomic level, which is why they become much, 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 much more powerful. They were made to be tyrant killers, so it makes a lot of sense. If you want to know a little bit more about relic hammers, I actually did a video about specifically the lore of relic hammers. It's really quick, so check that out if you're curious. But that's all I got on Taelor, so until the next one, I want to send a huge thank you to the extremely cool kids here on Patreon, the Steam Power Scoundrels, Dogmatized, and Devin, and thanks for watching.